Over the last 6 months, CBS News has been asking groups of Americans for their thoughts on the Trump administration. In our newest CBS News Nation Tracker poll, a joint project with YouGov, most now say the president is creating unnecessary conflict and drama, although a core group of his supporters still applaud him. Here to break it all down is CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. He joins me now from Washington. So, Anthony, you have categorized Trump supporters into 4 groups, from the president's most ardent backers, his quote-unquote believers, to his staunchest opponents, the resistors. Take us through where each of those groups is now.
Hi, Elaine. Yeah, what we want to do is get a sense of how people think about the president and what's going on in the country, not just the basic good or bad. And what you see is there are these real divisions based really on how they see him performing personally, even more so than the policy. So he's got this core group, you mentioned them, the believers. Well, they're shrinking in number a bit, down to 18% of the country from the start of the term. But what really defines them is they tell us they like what they see as this fight. They like the president taking on people that they think deserve it. They like him calling out people who they think are disloyal. They're the only group that wants him to do more tweeting of all the groups. And they really have this worldview where they feel the president is defending them and their way of life. And so they are still strongly with the president. But, you know, that same fighting, that same combativeness seems to be what's driving other people towards more opposition, or in the direction of opposition, Elaine.
Well, the poll reveals that most of the president's supporters now are conditional supporters, meaning that they would only back the president if he delivers what they want. But a majority of people see the administration as chaotic. What do people mean by that, Anthony, and what kind of change do they want to see?
Well, you know, this other group of supporters, and they still are with the president, that's important to emphasize, but right, they do describe the administration and what they see as more in chaos, and they're the ones who increasingly say that they think the president is creating unnecessary conflict and drama. These folks have always been more what I call transactional. They want to see policy outcomes, and what they're saying now is that the president, they find increasingly distracted. They don't feel like he's getting as much done as he could be, even though they do give him credit for the economy. But the day-to-day way that he's approaching the job is something that, compared to those strongest supporters, they're increasingly uncomfortable with. Now, they're still rooting for the president. That's important. They still want him to do, in their eyes, a little bit better. They still say that they're going to be patient with him. But the fact is, more people have started to move into this more conditional group, waiting for more of those policy outcomes that they'd like to see, Elaine.
Well, do people describe the president as acting presidential?
Well, his numbers on presidential are still down. His numbers on other adjectives that we ask people to use, like temperamental, like I said, distracted, are still high or on the increase. Some of these groups are less likely to see him as being presidential. And that's really having an effect. When you see those numbers move, that's what's pushing people more towards opposition. Even, as I said, even as they think that, say, manufacturing jobs are coming back to the U.S., that message appears to be getting out there. People give him at least some credit for where the economy is, but these other personal measures are tending to swamp that, Elaine.
Another interesting point in this poll are the curious opponents, those who are willing to support the president but have not yet pledged their allegiance to him. 53% of them cite his personal behavior as to why they are against him. Tell us more about that.
Well, there's this group out there who from the start have said, give us a reason to support the president. They weren't initially with him. They haven't been with him now, but they're rooting for him. They still want him to succeed. And yet they don't find anything that's happening in their lives that they can cling to. And that's really an important way in which these folks approach things. They don't really follow politics as closely as some of the other groups, but take, for example, the recent health care fight this week. They disapprove of how that president handled it, and the folks who didn't think that they understood what the Republican plan was going to be, or the folks who thought that they wouldn't be helped by it, were increasingly likely to move then away from both support and support for the president. And what that does is it communicates, or they're trying to communicate, we don't see something that's going to benefit us. So again, there's that this is a transactional group that doesn't see a direct impact for them right now. They're not keeping score in D.C. terms as far as how much legislation gets passed or who fills what jobs, but rather what comes back towards them.
So does not passing a health care bill hurt the president with his base?
You know, there's a small component overall that wants to see straight repeal, but most folks tell us that they'd like to see a bipartisan compromise, something that comes out where they can improve Obamacare and not just repeal it outright. So for the base, there's a small group that will be and is disappointed, but there's just as many that wanted to see something that they said was an improvement or a replacement plan. But many folks told us they couldn't even tell whether or not to oppose or support what was going on this week because they didn't understand it, because they didn't know what was in it. And so their default position there is to kind of assume that whatever comes out of Washington isn't going to help. And that's that kind of conundrum that folks are in right now.
All right, another interesting snapshot. Anthony Salvanto in Washington for us. Anthony, thanks.
Thank you.